A vehicle built to carry Marines from ship to shore is getting a new kind of protection, and it isn't steel plate. It's radio waves, according to the U.S. Marine Corps and reporting from defense trade outlets. The service is fielding a counter-drone jammer package built by Anduril Industries onto its amphibious combat vehicles, the wheeled, 8-wheel amphibious troop carriers that replaced the Vietnam-era AAV-7 in frontline Marine units. The package is meant to detect and disrupt small, cheap, first-person view drones, the kind that have proven lethal against armored vehicles in recent conflicts, most visibly in Ukraine, where quadcopters costing a few $100s have disabled tanks worth millions. This video covers what's actually confirmed about the jammer, how it's meant to work with the vehicle, why the Marine Corps is prioritizing this now, and what remains undisclosed or unverified about the program. Start with the platform itself, because understanding the amphibious combat vehicle explains why this upgrade matters. The ACV is built by BAE Systems, working with the Italian firm Iveco Defense Vehicles, and it entered Marine Corps service around 2020, gradually replacing the aging AAV-7 amphibious assault vehicle that had been in the fleet since the 1970s. Unlike its tracked predecessor, the ACV rides on 8 wheels, giving it better speed and reliability on roads once it's ashore, while still being able to swim from a Navy well deck to the beach under its own power. The Marine Corps operates several variants: the ACV-P, a personnel carrier that moves an infantry squad; the ACV-C, a command variant; the ACV-30, which mounts a remote turret with a 30mm cannon; and the ACV-R, a recovery vehicle. The vehicle exists to do one thing: move Marines from ship to shore and then off the beach and inland. That job puts it directly in the path of the threat this jammer is meant to counter. Here's the surprising part, and it isn't really about the vehicle. It's about why the vehicle needs this upgrade at all. For most of the ACV's development, its designers were focused on more traditional threats: mines, small arms, fire, rocket-propelled grenades, roadside bombs. Those threats shaped armored vehicle design for the past 2 decades. But the war in Ukraine changed the threat calculus for every armored vehicle and every military paying attention. Small, off-the-shelf quadcopters, modified to carry a small, explosive charge and flown by a human operator watching a first-person video feed, have destroyed or disabled main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers on both sides of that conflict. Vehicles that were, on paper, protected against far more powerful threats. Open-source loss trackers and reporting from outlets covering the war put these FPV drones among the most common causes of armored vehicle losses there, and defense planners across NATO and allied militaries have taken notice. That's the backdrop for the Marine Corps decision to arm the ACV with a jammer. It isn't a response to one incident. It's a response to a trend, one visible in open-source footage, in loss statistics, and in public statements from defense officials on both sides of the Atlantic who have said, in various ways, that cheap drones have changed what armored means. Now to the hard part, because getting an electronic warfare system onto an existing combat vehicle isn't just bolting on a box. Engineers integrating a jammer onto a platform like the ACV have to solve what's sometimes called electromagnetic fratricide, the jammer's own transmissions interfering with the vehicle's radios, its GPS receiver, and the communications gear of nearby vehicles in the same formation. A jammer strong enough to disrupt an adversary's drone control link can, handled poorly, also knock out the radios a Marine unit depends on to coordinate. People familiar with counter-drone system design generally say solving this takes careful frequency planning, directional or software-defined jamming tuned to specific bands, and a lot of field testing before a system gets cleared for fielding. It's a quiet but real engineering challenge, and a big part of why these systems take years, not months, to go from prototype to fielded equipment. The jammer itself is only half the equation, though. Solving electromagnetic fratricide gets a system onto a vehicle. It doesn't answer the harder question, the one that determines whether this program changes anything on a real battlefield. Anduril Industries supplies the counter-drone package, and it's worth understanding who they are, because this isn't a traditional defense contractor. Anduril was founded in 2017 by Palmer Luckey, previously known for founding the virtual reality company Oculus. Anduril builds on a different model than the legacy primes: software-defined, rapidly iterated hardware built around its Lattice operating system, which fuses sensor data and offers autonomous or semi-autonomous responses to threats. The company's known publicly for a range of products: the Sentry Tower, a surveillance and detection system originally built for border security; the Ghost family of small reconnaissance drones; the Anvil, an interceptor drone built to physically ram and disable hostile drones, and Pulsar, an electronic warfare system built to detect, track, and jam small unmanned aircraft. Anduril has also won a series of major Department of Defense contracts in recent years, including work on counter-drone systems for fixed installations and, per company statements and defense reporting, a growing role supplying electronic warfare capability to mounted, vehicle-based platforms, which is where this ACV package falls. That context matters because this isn't Anduril's first counter-drone product. It's an extension of a line the company has already fielded in other forms, adapted here to work from a moving, amphibious combat vehicle instead of a fixed tower or a dismounted operator's backpack. So how does a system like this actually work, in general terms? Counter-drone electronic warfare typically runs in layers: detect, track, defeat. Detection usually relies on radio frequency sensors listening for the control and video downlink signals a small drone and its operator exchange, sometimes paired with radar or electro-optical cameras that visually confirm a track. Once a drone is detected, the system can try to jam its control link, flooding the frequency the operator is using with noise so the drone loses its connection, or jam the GPS signal the drone relies on for navigation so it loses its position lock. Some more advanced small drones use frequency-hopping radios, spreading their signal across many channels to resist jamming, which is part of why modern counter-drone systems increasingly rely on software-defined radios that can adapt in real time rather than fixed, single-frequency jammers built for a threat that no longer holds still. None of this is unique to the Anduril ACV package. It describes how vehicle-mounted counter-drone jammers work as a category, and it helps make sense of what the Marine Corps is actually buying. Here's the part that will probably draw some pushback. For the better part of 2 decades, big military procurement prioritized expensive platforms, stealth aircraft, guided missiles, next-generation ships, while treating cheap countermeasures against low-end threats as an afterthought. Ukraine exposed how costly that blind spot can be, when weapons costing a few $100s started taking multi-million-dollar vehicles out of the fight. Whether the Marine Corps' response here is fast enough, or still playing catch-up against a threat that keeps adapting faster than acquisition cycles can move, is a fair question, not something to assume away. What this says about the current moment in military technology is worth sitting with. The barrier to entry for a credible battlefield threat has collapsed. A modified commercial quadcopter and a hobbyist pilot can now threaten a vehicle that took a decade and billions of dollars to design and field. That gap between cheap offense and expensive defense is reshaping procurement priorities across NATO and allied militaries, not just for the Marine Corps and not just for ground vehicles. Navies are having a version of the same conversation about ships. That naval angle is where this story connects to something bigger than one vehicle program. The drone threat that pushed the Marine Corps toward this jammer is the same threat forcing navies worldwide to rethink ship defense. In the Red Sea, Navy destroyers have burned through expensive interceptor missiles against cheap Houthi drones and missiles, a cost mismatch that's drawn public comment from Navy officials and defense analysts about the need for cheaper countermeasures: lasers, electronic warfare, interceptor drones. The Navy has also been fielding its own layered counter-drone systems on ships and at bases, and allied navies, from the Royal Navy to various Gulf and European partners, have sped up their own counter-UAS programs for the same reason. Seen that way, an Anduril jammer bolted onto a Marine Corps landing vehicle isn't a standalone story. It's one visible piece of a much larger shift across the sea services toward treating cheap drones as a primary threat instead of a secondary nuisance. That shift raises a fair question about where it actually leaves the Marine Corps, because a jammer on a vehicle is a countermeasure, not a solved problem, and countermeasures in this fight tend to have a short shelf life. So would you trust a jammer to protect a vehicle you were riding in, knowing the drone on the other side might already be built to resist it? That's not rhetorical. It's the operational bet every service fielding this kind of gear is making right now, and it's worth sitting with instead of answering too fast. Now to what's confirmed versus what's still open, because that line matters more here than in most stories. Confirmed per Marine Corps statements and defense trade reporting. The Marine Corps is fielding a counter-drone jammer package built by Anduril Industries onto amphibious combat vehicles, meant to add electronic warfare protection against small first-person view drones. Also confirmed, this fits a broader, well-documented Marine Corps push toward counter-unmanned aircraft systems capability, including programs like the Marine Air Defense Integrated System, which pairs radar, guns, and missiles for short-range air defense at the unit level, a separate but related effort from the vehicle-mounted jammer discussed here. what isn't fully public, and where this reporting should be upfront about its limits. The exact technical specs of the jammer package, its detection range, which frequency bands it covers, how many vehicles are slated to get it, the fielding timeline across ACV variants and units, and the value of any associated contract. Some of that may be classified or simply not released yet. Some of it may not be finalized publicly at the time of this reporting. When a defense program moves from limited fielding to wide-scale deployment, the public record often lags reality by months or longer, and this video reflects what's been publicly reported, not the full internal picture. One detail that stuck with us researching this: the pace of the shift. A threat that barely registered in mainstream military planning a decade ago, a hobbyist-grade quadcopter, is now driving procurement decisions for a service branch's frontline amphibious fleet. That's not a slow, generational shift in doctrine. It's a fast reaction to battlefield evidence, compressed into a few years, and it says something about how quickly conflicts elsewhere can reshape decisions made in Washington. Picture a Marine planner watching footage from Ukraine over the past few years, vehicle after vehicle disabled by something that costs less than a laptop. That's the pressure behind a program like this. It isn't abstract. It's watching a category of threat prove itself, repeatedly, against exactly the kind of vehicle your own troops ride in. There's also a resourcing problem worth naming plainly. Fielding new electronic warfare gear across an entire vehicle fleet takes money, technicians, and training time, all competing against other Marine Corps modernization priorities, new amphibious ships, long-range fires, other counter-drone programs already underway. Defense budget reporting shows counter-UAS spending across the U.S. military has grown substantially in recent years precisely because so many programs are competing for it at once, which is one reason fielding timelines for systems like this rarely get announced with the precision of a major weapons program. So where does that leave the open questions? Whether the jammer holds up against frequency hopping and increasingly autonomous drones that don't rely on a constant radio link to their operator, a threat category evolving specifically to beat jammers like this one. Whether the Marine Corps plans to field it across the whole ACV fleet or as a more limited, unit-by-unit rollout. And whether this program gets paired with kinetic or directed energy countermeasures, interceptor drones, guns, lasers that most defense planners agree a jammer alone can't fully replace, since electronic warfare and physical intercept are generally treated as complementary layers rather than substitutes for each other. For primary sources, official Marine Corps and Navy statements typically go through the Marine Corps public affairs channels and Marines. MIL and Anduril has published information about its counter-UAS product line, including Pulsar and Anvil, through its own newsroom. USNI News and Naval News are two of the more consistently sourced defense trade outlets covering programs like this in detail, and searching the amphibious combat vehicle program alongside Anduril's counter-drone products is a reasonable way to track how this develops. What we're left with, honestly, is a program that's real and confirmed in outline but still thin on public detail, which is worth noting rather than papering over with speculation. The Marine Corps is putting a jammer on a landing vehicle because cheap drones have proven, repeatedly and visibly, that they can stop expensive ones. Whether that jammer keeps pace with how fast the drone threat keeps changing is the question that will actually decide whether this program mattered, and it's one we probably won't get a full answer to for a while. Do you think electronic warfare packages like this become standard equipment on every armored vehicle in the next few years, or a stopgap that gets overtaken by the next generation of drones? Comment YES if you think it becomes the new standard, or no if you think it's already behind. And if you want the broader shift this fits into, how the U.S. Navy is handling the same cost mismatch problem against drones and missiles in the Red Sea. That's a story we've covered elsewhere on this channel, worth watching next if this one held your attention.